I want to start with a thought experiment. What if you deliberately sat down to watch the suffering of the other side? If you're Hindu, you watch videos of Muslim pain. If you're Muslim, you watch videos of Hindu pain. You just keep searching more and more. What kind of pattern do you think starts to emerge?
Well, you'd pretty quickly find the same structure repeating over and over again. And that brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. In these engines of conflict, who really wins? And maybe more importantly, who always loses?
Because here's the pattern. The people who suffer the most, the ones whose homes are burned, who lose family members, who live in constant fear, they are almost always ordinary, low-influence people, on both sides. And at the same time, the ones fanning the flames, they're often backed by money, by political power, by local influence. So let's break down exactly how this system works. All right, so let's start with the first engine of conflict, what we can call the top-down game. This is the idea that conflict is often ignited from above by powerful people who are manipulating the situation for their own benefit. It's a pretty common theory, and you see it laid out in research from scholars like Stephen Wilkinson. The idea is that ethnic violence can be a really effective political tool. Elites can push the fear button. They can point to visible differences like religion or race to distract from their own failures, to unite their base, or, to win an election. And this isn't just a theory, right? The consequences are devastatingly real. This slide shows data on Hindu-Muslim riots in India going all the way back to 1950. You don't even have to read the text. Just look at that graph on the top left. Every single one of those sharp spikes represents thousands of lives lost and communities just torn apart. It's a very stark reminder that when tensions are stoked from the top, real people pay the price. And here's the kicker, according to Wilkinson's research. The crucial thing isn't just what sparks a conflict, it's the response of the state. He argues that when a government wants to stop violence, it almost always can. So the decision to act or not to act is very often a calculated political choice. And that political choice, well, it has a hugely disproportionate impact. In a really detailed study of riots over several decades, while Muslims made up just about 12% of the population, they suffered this number, 73% of the total property damage. It's just a chilling example of how state inaction can allow violence to zero in on a specific community with just devastating precision. So how do elites actually mobilize people so quickly? Well, researcher Ward Barenschot calls it the patronage system. You can think of it like a loyalty network. In peacetime, a politician might provide jobs or resources in exchange for votes. But during a conflict, that exact same network can be flipped like a switch to mobilize mobs, to spread rumors, and to make sure the police look the other way. It's basically the infrastructure of impunity. But here's the thing. You have to wonder, right? If it were only the powerful manipulating everyone else, you'd think people would eventually catch on. So why is this strategy so effective so consistently? Is there something else going on here? And that brings us to the second engine, the bottom-up force. This isn't about what the leaders do. It's about the social climate on the ground that allows their strategies to work in the first place. What researchers Asima Sinha and Manisha Priyam tell us is that we can't just blame the leaders. For these conflicts to really catch fire, there has to be what they call consent and complicity from the wider population. It's like the powerful are planting seeds, but they're planting them in already fertile ground. So what's the psychological fuel for all this? Well, it often comes down to what Catherine Kramer calls the politics of resentment. And this is a really powerful social dynamic. It's where people start to see their own struggles, not as the result of complex economic or political forces, but as the fault of another, easily identifiable group who they believe is getting some kind of unfair advantage. Sinha and Priyam's research actually breaks down society into these different roles. So first, you have the hardliners. These are the true believers, the core activists driving the conflict. Then you have the willing ethnic nationalists. They're not official members of any group, but they totally share and amplify the message. Next, you have the bystanders. They don't like violence, but they've been persuaded that their group is under threat and needs protection. And finally, you have the moderates, who disagree with all of this but are often too quiet or too scattered to really make a difference. And when you put them all together, these groups create a really powerful social consensus. So you can see where this is going, right? It's not just top-down or bottom-up. The real engine of conflict is a two-way system. It's a vicious feedback loop where these two forces just keep amplifying each other. This is really the heart of the two-way model. Politicians sense the resentment that's simmering on the ground, and they craft their strategies to exploit it. Then, their actions validate and actually deepen that resentment in society, which in turn creates a demand for even more aggressive political stances.
It just becomes a self-perpetuating cycle.
And you can actually see this feedback loop in action in these diagrams from the research. On the left, you've got the psychological part, how perceptions of a threat can harden a group's identity. And then on the right, you see a real-world example of how a top-down decision, like a beef ban, gets approved by local leaders and then finds support in society, which creates a whole new social norm. The top-down action and the bottom-up support just lock each other in place.
So how does this cycle spin so fast? Well, the mechanism behind it is called diffusion. It's basically how ideas go viral, but for social conflict. It's not some central command telling everyone what to think. It's thousands of uncoordinated social shares, rumors, and conversations that build on each other, and they make once extreme ideas start to feel totally normal and mainstream. Okay, so if this is a self-reinforcing system, how on earth do we ever break it? Well, the answer seems to lie in the power of context, the everyday environment that we all live in. Research by Ashutosh Varshney provides a really fascinating answer here. He found that towns with weak ties between communities, places where groups live pretty separate lives, are extremely vulnerable to rumors and violence. But towns where communities have strong everyday connections through business or schools or neighborhood groups, they are incredibly resilient. They can actually resist the very same political provocations. And this idea is backed up by more recent research in post-conflict zones, which found that the overall social context, so the amount of positive interaction in your town or your region, is a much stronger predictor of peace than your own individual friendships. And that leads to a really powerful conclusion. Where you live matters more than who you know. The health of the whole community matters more than any single relationship. So the crucial point to take away from all this is that conflict is rarely a simple story. It's not just evil leaders tricking innocent people, and it's not just a spontaneous eruption of ancient hatreds. It's a complex, interactive system where political strategy and societal resentment get locked in this dangerous dance. And that leaves us with one final, and I think really crucial question. If the structure of our daily lives, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, our public spaces, is the thing that can either fuel this cycle or break it, then who's responsible for shaping that context? And what role do each of us play in building it?